My son texted me one morning telling me I wasn't invited on the family cruise. His wife wanted it to be just family. I stood there in the kitchen I built for them, holding the phone, reading those words over and over. Just months before, I'd handed them the keys to a mortgage-free home, thinking it was a gift of love. But that morning, I realized love without respect is nothing but quiet betrayal. I didn't yell, I didn't beg, I just typed back, "Okay." But inside, something in me shifted forever. They thought I'd stay quiet just like I always did, but quiet doesn't mean weak, not anymore. Stick around until the end of this story, because what happened next will show you that silence can become the sharpest weapon a man can hold. And there's a truth waiting behind this ending that I've never shared. Until now, they say betrayal doesn't always come with a shout. Sometimes it arrives quietly in a simple text message. That morning, standing by the kitchen counter, I read the words from my son, Eric. "Dad, Lindsay thinks it's better if it's just family on the cruise." Just family. I looked around the kitchen, the place where I taught Eric how to fix a leaky faucet, where we shared coffee after Linda passed away. The same kitchen I upgraded with soft close cabinets because Lindsay said it made the house feel more sophisticated. A house I paid off with every dollar I had saved from working 38 years as a systems engineer, thinking it was my gift of love to them. I felt the cold granite under my hand, the sun streaming through the window onto the photographs hanging on the wall. Eric's first fishing trip in Colorado when he was 7. That Disney trip I paid for when Lindsay first joined the family. Christmas mornings, birthdays, moments I thought meant something. But at that moment, reading that text, it all felt like a museum of mistakes. All those sacrifices, all those quiet moments of giving, and now, I wasn't family enough to sit at their table or sail on their cruise, even though I paid for the home they lived in. I took a deep breath, set the phone down, and looked out the window at the oak tree Linda used to love, the Texas breeze rustling its leaves. And then something shifted inside me. They thought I would stay quiet. They were wrong. Stick around, because in the next part of this story, you'll see how a quiet man can change everything without raising his voice, and why this wasn't the only betrayal waiting to surface. They say silence can be louder than words, and that day my silence was deafening. After I read Eric's message, I didn't text back anything else. I didn't call. I didn't beg to join them. I walked over to the old oak dining table, the one Linda and I bought 25 years ago for our first home, and I sat down. The morning sun coming through the kitchen window felt warm on my face, but inside, it felt like winter. I looked around at the photos on the walls, the family gatherings I hosted, the birthdays I paid for, the countless small gifts I bought for Lindsay just to make her smile. I remembered the weekend Eric and I spent repainting the garage, the way he used to ask for my help to fix his truck, or how he'd sit with me on the porch after mowing the lawn. But lately the calls came less, the visits even less than that. They were always too busy, too tired, too wrapped up in their own lives. I convinced myself it was just the way life goes when your kids grow up. But deep down, I felt it, the quiet distance growing between us. That morning, the house felt emptier than it had in years. I got up, poured myself a cup of coffee, and stood by the window, watching the breeze move the leaves on the oak tree. I thought of Linda, how she would have seen this coming, how she used to warn me to hold my ground. I took a long sip of coffee, feeling the heat warm my hands, and I made a promise to myself. They would not take any more from me. Stay with me, because in the next part of this story, I'll tell you about the friend who walked through my door that morning and said words that would change the course of everything. They say a true friend shows up when the world goes quiet. That morning, My world was silent, but Frank Harris wasn't about to let me sit alone. Frank's been my friend for over 40 years. We served together back when we were just young men trying to figure out life, long before marriages, kids, mortgages, and heartbreaks. He's the kind of friend who doesn't wait for an invitation, especially when he knows you're hurting. He walked in carrying 2 coffees from the diner down the road, the one with the old vinyl booths and the smell of bacon in the air. "Figured you could use this," he said, setting the coffee down on the oak table without asking. I didn't say much at first, just nodded, staring at the steam rising from the cup. Frank didn't need words. He sat down across from me, his eyes scanning my face, reading what I couldn't say out loud. After a few quiet sips, he finally spoke. "What happened, Grant?" I slid my phone across the table. He picked it up, read Eric's message, and his jaw tightened. He didn't curse, didn't yell. He just shook his head, the kind of shake that says, "I've seen this coming." "Grant," he said, leaning in, "you've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. You've given them everything. Now you need to protect what's yours before they take more." I tried to brush it off, saying it was probably just a misunderstanding, but Frank's eyes sharpened. "Don't be blind, brother. Check your accounts. Don't wait until it's too late." His words settled in like a cold wind, waking me up from the fog of disappointment. Stay with me, because in the next part of this story, you'll see what I found when I finally checked, and why that single moment became the turning point I never saw coming. They say you shouldn't look for trouble, but sometimes trouble's already there, waiting for you to open your eyes. That night, after Frank left, I sat in my recliner, the old one Linda used to call your throne, with the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. I stared at my laptop, the glow of the screen lighting up the quiet room. Frank's words echoed in my head, "Check your accounts." With a deep breath, I opened my Bank of America login. My fingers felt stiff, like they were carrying the weight of every bill, every grocery run, every quiet sacrifice I'd made for Eric and Lindsay. At first glance, everything looked normal. Utility payments, a few grocery charges, the usual donations I made to the veterans group every month. But the further I scrolled, the colder the room felt. There were transfers, small enough not to raise alarms, $350 here, $500 there, labeled as home repairs or emergency maintenance. But I hadn't approved any emergency repairs. I dug deeper, clicking through linked user accounts, and there it was. Lindsay's name. She had linked her card to my accounts, quietly, systematically, bleeding money out month after month while smiling across the dinner table. I sat back, the glow of the laptop casting shadows on the family photos hanging on the wall. Photos that now felt like reminders of every moment I'd handed over trust without a second thought. It wasn't about the cruise anymore. This was theft, wrapped in the disguise of family. My heart was pounding, but not with fear. This was something colder, sharper, a realization. Stay with me, because in the next part I'll tell you what I remembered that made this betrayal even deeper, and why I realized they weren't just taking my money, they were preparing to take everything. They say the worst mistakes come disguised as kindness. As I stared at the transactions Lindsay had been making, something else hit me. A memory I'd tried to bury under trust in the hope that family would always do right. A year ago, Lindsay showed up at my house with a folder and a notary. She smiled that polite smile she always wore, saying, "Grant, it's just paperwork to help us handle things if there's ever an emergency. You shouldn't have to deal with bills and taxes in your retirement." It sounded reasonable then. She said it was for my benefit, so I signed. Now looking at the screen, I realized what I had really signed. A durable power of attorney that gave Lindsay complete access to my finances. My retirement accounts, my investments, even decisions about my property and health care. All while I thought I was being a helpful father, a man who made life easier for his son and daughter-in-law. They were positioning themselves, setting the stage to take everything while I was still alive, legally, quietly. I closed the laptop slowly, the light in the room feeling colder. The framed photo of Eric as a boy holding a baseball glove stared back at me from the shelf. Was he blind, or did he just not care as long as the money kept flowing? I stood up, the floor creaking beneath my feet, and looked out the window at the dark Texas sky. The wind was picking up, rustling the old oak tree Linda used to love. They thought I would stay quiet, that I wouldn't fight back. But they forgot something important. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Stay with me, because in the next part, I'll tell you about the moment I walked into my lawyer's office and said 6 words that started a quiet storm they never saw coming. They say it only takes a moment to change everything. The morning after I discovered Lindsay's quiet theft, I woke up before the sun. I poured myself a cup of coffee, letting the steam warm my hands, and watched the dawn break over the Texas sky. The quiet of the house felt different. It wasn't the silence of defeat anymore. It was the silence before a storm. I got in my truck and drove down familiar roads, passing the old diner, the hardware store where I used to take Eric for father-son projects. This time I wasn't going there. I pulled into the parking lot of Dalton's office, my lawyer for over 15 years. He looked surprised to see me so early, but the look in my eyes told him this wasn't a friendly visit. We sat across his old oak desk, sunlight streaming across the stacks of paperwork, the air heavy with the smell of coffee and old wood. I took a deep breath, leaned forward, and said 6 words that shifted the weight off my shoulders. I need to protect myself now. Dalton didn't ask questions. He nodded slowly, pulling out a legal pad and his reading glasses. Tell me everything, Grant. I told him about the text, the money, the paperwork Lindsay had me sign, the linked accounts, the quiet theft happening under the mask of family. His jaw tightened as he listened, his pen moving quickly across the page. They've been planning this, he said quietly. We're going to stop it. At that moment, I realized I wasn't alone in this anymore. Stay with me, because in the next part, I'll share how we started to take everything back, quietly, legally, and completely, while they were out living their lives, thinking they had won. They say timing is everything. While Eric and Lindsay packed their bags for their family cruise, I was packing something else: evidence. Dalton and I worked quietly, reviewing every document Lindsay had ever sent me. Every friendly email, every payment I never approved, every signature she slipped in while smiling across the table. We flagged every unauthorized withdrawal, every linked card, every quiet transaction she'd labeled as home maintenance while draining my savings. We built a timeline, piece by piece, so clear even a blind man could see the betrayal. Dalton connected me with a private investigator, a man named Rick, who had eyes sharp as a hawk and the patience of a hunter. Rick dug deeper, tracing accounts tied to Lindsay's maiden name, discovering she was funneling money into a separate investment account while telling me she was helping with bills. While they were sipping cocktails somewhere in the Caribbean, we were freezing every joint authorization and locking down my accounts. We prepared to reverse the house transfer, to take back what was rightfully mine. It was quiet work. No yelling, no drama. Just signatures and stamps, legal filings and documentation. Quiet but powerful steps that turned the tide without a single raised voice. I remember sitting by the window that night, looking at the oak tree swaying in the Texas wind. The air felt lighter, the silence no longer suffocating. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting. I was taking control. Stay with me, Because in the next part, you'll see the moment they came home, smiling from their cruise, only to find out the house they thought they owned was no longer theirs, and why that was just the beginning of their lesson. They say some lessons hit hardest when the world looks normal. It was a bright Monday morning when Eric and Lindsay pulled into the driveway of what they thought was still their home. The sun was shining, the Texas air warm, the world calm. They were fresh off their cruise, laughing as they stepped out, rolling their suitcases across the sidewalk. But then they stopped. There were moving trucks in the driveway, and a young couple stood near the front door, smiling with the realtor as they discussed the last details before moving in. Eric's face dropped, confusion clouding his eyes. Lindsay's lips tightened, her head snapping around as she looked for me. I was there, standing calmly across the street, leaning against my truck. I watched as the realization hit them, as the truth seeped in. Eric finally spotted me, waving me over, his voice shaking. "Dad, what's going on?" Lindsay stormed toward me, her words sharp. "You can't do this. We have plans with the house. We're refinancing, Grant." I pulled out the folder Dalton and I prepared, thick with every document, every evidence of their betrayal, and handed it to Eric. His hands shook as he flipped through page after page of transactions, power of attorney revocation, house reversal filings. Lindsay tried to snatch the papers, but Eric held on, his eyes darting between the pages and me, realizing for the first time the depth of what they had done and what I had undone. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I simply looked at them and said, "Not your house. Not anymore. Stay with me, because in the next part you'll see what Lindsay tried to do next, and how she learned that gambling with a quiet man's trust comes with a price she wasn't ready to pay. They say when people get caught, they show you who they really are." Standing there in the driveway, Lindsay's face went red with anger. Her hands were shaking as she yelled, "You can't just take everything away! We're family!" Eric stood beside her, silent, clutching the folder of documents. His eyes darted from the papers to me, then back to Lindsay, realizing she had led them into this mess. I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I just let the silence sit between us, heavy and undeniable. Lindsay tried to step closer, waving her finger, her voice cracking. "You'll regret this, Grant. We were just trying to help you. You're old and you don't know how to manage these things." I took a slow breath, looking her in the eye. "Help? Is that what you call draining my accounts behind my back? Using my name to funnel money into your investments? Trying to take everything while smiling in my face?" Eric's shoulders slumped, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who once asked me to fix his bike, who used to call me Dad with respect. But that boy was long gone, replaced by a man who let his wife turn him into a thief. "You did this to yourselves," I said, my voice calm. Lindsay tried one last time. "We're family, Grant. You can't cut us off." I looked at her steady and said, "Family doesn't steal." Stay with me, because in the final part of this story, you'll see what I did next, and why walking away was the strongest thing I've ever done in my life. They say the hardest part is letting go, but sometimes it's the only way to reclaim your life. I stood there for a moment longer, watching Eric and Lindsay process everything. The house, the accounts, the power they thought they had over me. All gone. They tried to speak, but there were no words left that could change the truth. The truth that they gambled with my trust and they lost. I turned, walking back to my truck, feeling the Texas sun warm on my back. It felt different this time. It felt like freedom. As I drove away, I didn't look back at the house. It wasn't my burden anymore. It wasn't a place of betrayal anymore. It was just a building, bricks and wood, ready for a new family, a new story. I pulled into my small apartment, just 900 square feet, nothing fancy. But it was mine, fully mine. No one could take it from me. No one could use it to control me. I sat down in my recliner, the same one Linda used to call your throne, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. There was no anger left, no regret, just peace. They thought I couldn't live without them. The truth was, I was just waiting to remember who I was before they drained me dry, and now I was living again. Stay with me, because in the payoff of this story, I'm going to share the real lesson I learned from all of this, and why quiet men like us have more power than we ever realize when we decide to stand up and take it back. They say quiet men don't fight back, but they forget. Quiet men don't need to yell to take their lives back. When I sat in that small apartment, the morning sun warming my hands as I held a simple cup of coffee, I realized I had spent too many years confusing love with sacrifice and sacrifice with letting myself be used. They thought they could take everything quietly while smiling in my face. They thought I would keep giving because that's what fathers do. And they were right, for a long time. But one morning, with one text, everything changed. I remembered who I was before I spent every day trying to keep the peace, before I let people take my kindness for weakness. Taking back the house wasn't revenge. It was reclaiming my dignity. Freezing my accounts wasn't about punishing them. It was about protecting what I worked for, what Linda and I built together with sweat, long hours, and every sacrifice we made to give Eric a better life. Now, in my small apartment, I find peace in simple moments. Watching the Texas breeze move the trees, hearing the quiet hum of the world around me, knowing I am free from the weight of being used by the people I loved most. Brother, if you're listening, I want you to know it's never too late to stand up. It's never too late to reclaim your life, your peace, your dignity. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt like you were giving until there was nothing left, let me know in the comments. Share your story with me. I read every single one and I see you. Hit the like button if you felt this. And consider subscribing for more stories about quiet men like us taking back what's ours, one small step at a time. Because quiet men aren't weak, we're patient, we're steady. And when we decide to stand up, the world learns that quiet can be the strongest sound they've ever heard. Stay strong, brother. Your silence is your strength until it's time to speak.